Good afternoon and welcome everyone in person and online. My name is Dr. Wendy Williams. I'm the Dean of the School of Education at Mills College, and I want to thank you for joining us for our panel discussion, Ready to Lead, Diverse Women's Leadership in Educational Context. Before we begin, we are going to acknowledge the land that we are on. We do this often and always at Mills College because we recognize that we are here by the grace of the labor and sacrifice of so many who have come before us. So I want to acknowledge that we are on the Huichin territory, stolen from the Muikama Ohlone Indians. This land was not ceded, and we know that we again are here on borrowed space and borrowed time, and actually that was stolen, and we want to acknowledge that. Want to welcome everybody just to come on in and find a seat wherever you feel comfortable. Again, my name is Dr. Wendy Williams, and I'm the Dean of the School of Education at Mills College. And I wanted to share with you a little bit about why we decided to hold a conversation about diverse women's leadership in educational context, or as we like to say, ready to lead. And I thought the best way for me to think about doing this is to lean on the legacy of one of my sheroes, Fannie Lou Hamer. Now, Ready to Lead, this conversation with educational leaders, is one that is happening at the tail end on the very last day of Women's History Month. And we want to celebrate all the women who have come before us and made space for leadership possibility in this moment. But we also want to celebrate the women who have made an effort and who draw courage and wisdom and lead in this moment and in very trying times. And I would say that educational leadership in these times is quite trying. Would you agree? So let me tell you a little bit about Fannie Lou Hamer. I recently finished a book that scholar Keisha Blaine wrote on Fannie Lou Hamer's life. It's entitled Until We Are Free, or Until I Am Free. And this is a text, that's a common quote that Fannie Lou Hamer had expressed in a number of instances to speak to one of the main strategies of her leadership and fight for rights and activism for all people. It really is a very radically inclusive vision for leadership. And I thought about how some of the strategies that Fannie Lou Hamer put into practice in her leadership struggle and for the leadership struggle for workers, farmers, black people, women, and folks all across the globe stand out in terms of some of the leadership strategies that women and diverse women use and utilize within the context of educational leadership. So one of those strategies is to use radical honesty. Now, as somebody who has a radically honest mouth, I can tell you that sometimes it does get you in trouble, but it also is incredibly and very necessary to always tell the truth as you see it, and particularly when one is embodied in the female body, in a body that is non-white and is in the context of patriarchal and racist systems. Your truth is particularly important to share. It's a standpoint and a perspective that the society really does require and need to find true and engaging equity. Fannie Lou Hamer, again, in the term, until I am free, none of us are free. And until we all are free, none of us are free, really spoke to a more inclusive solidarity and the need for us to really not walk away from tables of negotiation relative to rights and access until everyone who is impacted, negatively impacted, or who has an opportunity to be positively influenced has been heard, and that even those who are not at those tables have an opportunity to have their needs and rights met. She believed in grassroots leadership. She came up in a time, Jim Crow and civil rights, when the picture of racial rights leadership were predominantly men and were predominantly people who were educated. So educated men and women really took the forefront from her and from others. And so coming from the farming and sharecropping background that she had and not educated, her voice wasn't one necessarily that people always lifted up and put in front of the group because it wasn't necessarily seen as the most respectable. But she really advocated and articulated the need for a grassroots perspective and that you did need to know about the experience of the least among us in order to put forth a fight. She was a really staunch Christian woman and religious woman, and those values really did shape her thinking. More than anything, this woman, Fannie Lou Hamer, never gave up. She had a fight for justice that was enduring. And if you know her story, and I'm hoping that I'm inspiring you to go learn her story, you can appreciate the ways in which her body, her psychology, her energy, her effort was relentless until the last breath that she took. She was fighting for justice. She died young. She was very sick, very ill, and had not been taken well care of by the community around her that she fought very much for. And so one of the pieces that I want to lift up is the need that Fannie Lou Hamer's life demonstrates for us around self-care, but also community care. That when you have women and folks who are leading you well, that you think about how they are doing. And that it's not just that they have self-care, but that a community that benefits from their leadership takes care of them. Fannie Lou Hamer died penniless and with hospital bills that really did stress her family. And so we just think about that when we are excited and celebrated and clicking and retweeting all the people who are doing all the things. Be thinking about whether or not they had a meal that night, or if someone checked in on them and made sure that they were okay and that they were resting well, because you need that. So I thought about all these strategies and values that Fannie Lou Hamer brought to her leadership, and I think about what it means to lead in an educational context in these times. These same values and perspectives are so necessary. You must stay in the fight. You must hear from everyone, students, parents, families, community members. Folks who are never, ever going to enter your classroom are stakeholders in the educational endeavor that we seek to lead within. And that's important. I'm delighted that we have such an esteemed group of scholars, leaders amongst us. And I'm really thrilled to introduce you to one that I am most proud of. And her name is future Doctora Christina Rodriguez. Let me tell you a little bit about Christina. She is a first-generation Nicaraguan woman, Nicaraguan American Latina woman with a multicultural and equity mindset, and she's committed to creating equitable opportunities for women of color in business. She has her MBA. She also founded and created an organization. It's called Latinas with Masters, and it is a place where she wanted to create a sense of belonging and a resource guide for scholars of color navigating higher education. If you are online, I know that that's not for everybody, but if you're on Instagram, look up Latinas with Masters and follow some of the important, engaging work that Christina is a part of. Currently, she received her bachelor's in Latino studies from San Francisco State University and went on to receive her master's MBA with an emphasis in marketing at Notre Dame de Namur University. She is currently pursuing her doctorate in our educational leadership program here at Mills College, and we are so thrilled to have her and her leadership and her voice amongst us.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. It's hard not to get teary-eyed, in quite honesty, because, I'm very proud to be a first-generation Latina, and especially to be here with my peers and with my mentors. So I want to thank everybody for coming today to the Ready to Lead Diverse Women's Equity-Centered Leadership. Before I introduce the four powerhouse doctoras that we have here, I also would like to acknowledge that today is Cesar Chavez Day. It is the day that he is born, and in true Latina fashion, and being a Latina studies major, it would, I cannot think of a better place to be in front of, four women who are leading the way with intention and having, that energy that Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta did with activism, civil rights, labor movement. Again, I'm just so honored to be here. So I just wanted to also include that because that's very important to me as well. So the first powerhouse panelist that I would like to introduce to you is Dr. Sierra Martinez. She has dedicated her career to eliminating educational inequality. She is the Assistant Vice Chancellor at the California Community Colleges, and she leads the Institutional Effectiveness Partnership Initiative in deploying professional development and technical assistance to advance equity and success strategies. A Nicaraguense like myself and a Los Angeles native raised in Compton, she was the first in her family to attend college. Martinez began her higher education education career at the University of Southern California, where she served as Assistant Director in the Office of Admissions and Associate Director of Academic Affairs in the Computer Science Department. In 2011, Dra. Martinez returned to her alma mater, UC Davis, as Director of the Ronald E. McNair Scholars Program, guiding first-generation and low-income students to pursue doctorate degrees in their respective fields. While working with first-generation students, Martinez conducted research during her doctoral program that examined student experiences in community college developmental learning communities. Dr. Martinez holds a bachelor's degree in rhetoric and communications from UC Davis, Latina with master's. She has a Master of Education in Post-Secondary Administration and Student Affairs from USC, and a PhD in Higher Education from Claremont Graduate University. So welcome, Dra. Martinez. Hello. The second powerhouse doctora I have sitting right next to me, her name is Dr. Shawn Nealy-Oparah. She is an innovative leader and a trauma-responsive educator with 20 years of experience. She is an experienced leader, restorative justice practitioner, and a facilitator in education. She works as a supervising improvement partner at Partners in School Innovation, which is an equity-focused continuous improvement organization, an adjunct professor here at Mills College, and I've had the pleasure of taking her class, and a consultant at Truth. As a leader at Partners, she uses a somatic, trauma-responsive, restorative justice and equity lens to build the capacity of her colleagues as well as support schools to develop anti-racist practices and policies. At Mills College School of Education, she teaches a graduate course on trauma-informed leadership. At Truth, she provides coaching, training, and consulting to schools and educators to create equity and healing-centered, trauma-responsive schools. Dr. Nealy-Oparah holds a Bachelor of Arts degree in Black Studies and Political Science from my alma mater, San Francisco State University, and a Master's of Education degree in Urban Education from the University of California, Los Angeles, and an EDD in Educational Leadership from our very own Mills College. So welcome, Dr. Shawn Nealy-Oparah. The third powerhouse that we have here is we have Dra. Sabrina Kwist. She is the Dean of Equity and Inclusion at Los Medanos College. She is a dedicated leader and credits her passion, motivation, and success to her perspective as a first-generation college student who relied on the communities that she grew up in to help her achieve a greater sense of identity and strength. As Dean of Equity and Inclusion at Los Medanos College, Dr. Kwist holds a broad range of institutional and management responsibilities, including leading, coordinating, establishing, and executing equity goals among students and faculty. Her enthusiasm for students and community is apparent in her extensive involvement in academic and empowerment organizations. During her undergraduate education at the University of California, Santa Barbara, she dedicated time to the program of Determined Students and the Associated Student Commission on Racial Equality. While at Mills College, she was involved with the Solidarity Lounge, Summer Academic Workshop, and served as the Assistant Dean of Students. Dr. Kwist holds a Bachelor of Arts in Sociology from UC Santa Barbara, a Master of Education degree in Higher Education and Student Affairs Administration from the University of Vermont, and an EDD in Educational Leadership, also here from Mills College. So welcome, Dra. Kwist. Hello. And our final powerhouse panelist is Dra. Genevieve Siwabessy. She is the Dean of Student Success and Support Programs and Interim Dean of Instruction at Cuesta College. She was a very passionate educator committed to cultivating institutional conditions to support transformative learning and development for the benefit of the college community. The student experience and student voice are her compass. Over the course of her nearly 20 years practicing in the field of higher education, she has developed as a leader grounded in cultural fluency, social justice, and joy. As the Dean of Student Success and Support Programs and Interim Dean of Instruction at Cuesta College, She leverages her technical skills and leadership ability to foster dialogue, implement change in support of students, staff, and faculty. Dr. Siwabessy holds a Bachelor of Arts degree in History from UC Davis, a Master of Arts degree in Education, Student Affairs Leadership from CSU Sacramento, and an EDD from UC Davis. So join me in welcoming these four powerhouse leaders to start our conversation for today. So the first question is, in conversations about leadership, the experiences of women, and especially BIPOC women, are rarely a part of that conversation. Please share with us how you knew you were ready to lead and how your positionality as a woman from your cultural background shaped your preparation for leadership.
Thank you, Christina, for the question, and thank you for having us here today. So I want to start off by saying that. And I think if I'm honest, I mean, this was all of these questions were very reflective for me, but especially this one, right? Because you have to go back and be like, when was the first time I thought myself as a leader? And if I'm honest, I think this started when I was a kid. I was put in roles at home at an early age. My parents, like as you mentioned earlier, I'm Nicaraguense, so my parents immigrated from Nicaragua. And like many immigrants' families, I think, they didn't understand the language. So my siblings and I grew up translating for them at the doctor's office, at the bank, and anywhere else they needed us. I was writing bank checks at the early age of 10. I was driving, I know this sounds crazy, at 11, because my parents had to work. And part of my responsibility was that I had to do the laundry for the household. So I literally would pack up the car, but take my younger sister with me, and drive about 10 minutes away because I didn't want to go to the laundromats in Compton. So we would drive to the neighboring city, which was Southgate, because it was supposed to be the nicer area. But again, this kind of led me into sort of that role of leadership at home. And my brother would work with my dad. So I think when you think about it, for many immigrant kids or first generation kids, you're sort of thrown into those roles and you become leaders in your own right. And then when I think about as a young adult, I went to work at USC, one of my first professional jobs. And within a year, my name was given to a department manager to contact me to come work for them. So they tried to recruit me. They kept calling me and I was like, what do they want? I didn't answer the call because I didn't know what they wanted. But they insisted. They called about 2 or 3 times and I finally answered the call, and they really were encouraging me to apply for an academic advisor position. And that was I think I was about 23 at that point. And that was my first role, I think, as a leader, right? Professionally, as you would consider a leader in a professional role. And I don't think I've looked back since. I think ever since that position, I restructured the whole position to become associate director of that department and then moved on. But I really had a lot of support in that role. And then I just really consider myself as a leader and then continue to grow. But in that aspect, I just made sure that I was helping others along the way. So a leader as a kid who grows up to be a leader as a woman. So thank you.
It's a beautiful question. First of all, I want to thank Dr. Wendy Williams for inviting me to be here. So it's an honor. Thank you. In asking me that question, the first woman I think of is my mother. I think of how my mother was a leader in our family, even though no one called her that. But I watched her. I was a very observant child, and I watched people. That's how I learned. And I watched people in terms of how they interacted with other people. And given the complexity of things, the trauma that was happening in my family, I watched my mom in terms of how she navigated very difficult situations. And as a young girl, I said, I want that. How do I get that? So moving into my 20s and 30s, I was very intentional about the company I keep, right? And I was blessed to really sit with this intentionality of gravitating to being surrounded by beautiful Black women who were 10, 15 years older than me. And that was beautiful because they were able to see my potential. They were able to see something in me that I couldn't see yet. And so they nurtured my wings in such a beautiful, loving, and caring way that I was able to grow. because they were leaders in their own right, whether it was in their family, in the organization, in the community. And again, I paid attention. And so they believed in my spirit in terms of what my spirit was called here to do while I'm here on this earth. And so the things that they shared with me sat in my DNA, it sat in my spirit. And the biggest lesson I learned from all of these women, including my mother, was the beauty of relationships, the quality of relationships. That matters. And because of that, that prepared me for leadership.
Ooh, you guys got me in the feels, and it's only question number one. Well, I just also want to say thank you. It's an honor to be in community with you all. And thanks for doing this high flex version. I still feel the energy in the space, and I'm grateful. Well, first, this question was the question that I least wanted to answer. And so I'll just be transparent. And I think that's in part because at times I still wonder, if I'm ready to lead, right? Am I ready for this experience of responsibility, of connected, kind of holding myself accountable in a connected way? Do I have the vision and support to honor the truth in the room? And am I making the relationships and connections necessary to live what I think is leadership, which is a practice of loving justice? And so I'll start with how I came to that, and that was watching my dad. My dad was a single dad in Long Beach, so not too far from Compton, immigrant father. We had the American dream, and then we lost the American dream. And we struggled both economically, being unhoused at times, and being interdependent. We grew up in one room of some of his best friend's house, my sister, myself, and my dad. And I think, when you think about that, you may think, oh, trauma or struggle. But what I see is that interconnected beauty. My dad was the dad that sat at the donut shop and helped folks fill out their immigration paperwork in like 5 different languages that he didn't know. And I would sit there for hours because, we didn't have all that good iPad goodness. We just sat and we watched and we listened. And I think I bring that story up because I want to bring my ancestors in the room, right? He passed when I was a freshman in college. I bring that example up because it defines how I understand leadership, which is doing the work, right, in community. And it shows something that I think is really important. And I think as a multiracial person, as a woman, the generosity, the loving generosity that is one of the strengths, both culturally and, from coming from the economic perspective, from the immigrant perspective, and from being a woman. I think there's something really powerful about that strength and that leadership stance, but it's also something that gets taken advantage of. And so I think, in those times I question, am I ready to lead? And I'm humbled to be on this group with such amazing panelists. So thank you for that question.
And, and there's different ways in which we can show up for one another, and it necessarily doesn't have to always be on social media or a type of marketing gig, right? It could also be within your community and how you assist and show up with one another. So I appreciate that as well, because that's also very important to recognize. So thank you.
One, thank you so much for inviting me to be a part of this esteemed group and to be able to share a little bit of my own experiences in community. And two, this is a really profound question for me. I practice a lot of self-reflection, and I felt like as I was preparing to sort of respond, it brought up new things that I hadn't considered before. Specifically, you know, I think a little bit about my own positionality within my family. Family, I think, tends to be important to us, women with cultural backgrounds that it sounds like we're coming from. And, you know, being the youngest and the only girl in a family of 3 siblings, I always felt like I had something to prove. You know, I think in a lot of ways, my leadership was just this desire to demonstrate that I can take on more responsibility. I do have value to add to the you know, the family, the work that I do nowadays. And what came up for me as I was reflecting on the importance of family and shaping my leadership was that culturally, someone like me wouldn't have possessed a leadership role. But I had a mother who really broke the mold on this, and she was both a role model for me as you know, within the family structure, and also professionally. You know, she was demonstrating her ability to serve as a middle leader in the semiconductor industry. We immigrated to the United States for her to pursue, you know, this opportunity for our family. And, you know, just thinking about what she's probably experienced in her profession in order to advance, again, our family is still striking. And, you know, even to this day, I reflect on my own awareness of my positionality, right, to get at to that second part of the question. And, you know, the barriers that we often talk about in our careers in higher education as women leaders, that was not visible to me until probably a few years ago, right? Well into my career. I always knew that I had something to prove. I did things like seeking out additional credentials. I'm always, you know, tackling the next professional development opportunity. I really wanted to legitimize sort of my qualifications as a leader. And it wasn't explicit for me until, again, probably 5 years ago when I reflected and I thought, huh, you know, I'm doing things that I feel like some of my colleagues aren't having to do as a woman leader. And, you know, again, as an immigrant to this country, someone who identifies as Asian American. And so I think this question again brought up for me what that means. And I also don't want to dismiss the assets that my cultural background, my positionality brings to the table as well. And, you know, I always like to highlight the fact that I listen intently, I feel profoundly, I think strategically, and I bring to my work a level of humility. And like Dr. Oparah mentioned, a value in relationships that I think is grounded in my cultural background and my upbringing. And I think as a result, you know, challenges now, you know, the challenges I face, or maybe I'll call them opportunities, are more shared by me amongst my trusted circle, my colleagues, my mentors, so that I can engage in continuous reflection, to continue to learn and grow, and again, affirm the value that I bring to my leadership roles and in this profession. And so I thank you for this question and bringing some of these feels up for me.
And you reflecting, it also makes me think about just the people that I also encounter, either as through my colleagues or through my friends on social media, and the common vibe really that we get is that, hey, we're first generation and we haven't been guided, right, to how to navigate higher education, but we have shared values and shared obstacles, unfortunately. So why not, let's help each other to uplift our community, right, and help the future generation leaders, instead of hearing, which I often heard a lot, is, well, it was hard for me, so you got to figure it out, right? But I feel like this new generation is like, yeah, that's not going to work for me anymore. I'm not going to take that as an answer, because I took that as an answer a lot. And I felt like, wow, I guess I really got to do it on my own, because I saw my parents do it on my own. But then I just realized that their struggle is not my struggle. I am an American citizen. I was born here. I know the language. I know the culture, right? I identify with both cultures, but yet we're still struggling. And so what I'm also hearing is that, you know, you just figured that out 5 years ago. I'm figuring this out 2 years ago, being a student here at Mills College. You know, it's when it really clicked on me, where I'm like, wait, hold on a second. We're all first generation here. We've all dealt with these things. Like, well, let's help each other uplift our communities. So this is actually one that was on here, but also it was asked, and I think it's important. As a mother in academia, I sometimes feel guilty myself, you know, being a doctoral student, working full time, engaging with my friends on Latinas with Masters. You know, I feel guilty, you know, with providing myself with self-care. So leadership is said to be hard, lonely at times, and stressful. How do you take care of yourself and or allow others to care for you in your respective roles? Dr. Nealy-Oparah, I'll start with you.
Self-care, especially for a Black woman, wow. Because our bodies have been conditioned to fix, to attend, to restore, to put it together. So I learned about self-care early on in my life, just by watching other people, again, paying attention. And I'm intentional about the company I keep, right? So I want to be around people who are also staying healthy, taking care of themselves. I also tap into my joy. I think that's extremely important, right? Because I work hard, it's important to tap into my joy, it's important to laugh, feel the liberation in my body when I tap into my joy. I also make time for family and friends, very, very intentional. I also eat healthy. I have a disciplined practice of exercising, meditation, somatic practice, right? I need to do all of those things, right, in a system that will wear you down, that will tear you down, that will find the smallest crack and throw you off kilter and make you think that something is wrong with you. So I do all of those things. And what I've learned as I've grown older, because I grew up in a neighborhood where it was not okay to show vulnerability, right? And so I learned that it's okay to be vulnerable, that my vulnerability and my strength can live both within me. I don't have to just be one. And it is okay for me to ask for help. That was really hard for me. It is okay for me to ask for help. It is okay for me to cry on someone else's shoulders. I do not have to do it all by myself. Being in community is important because it's healing and it keeps me whole.
Thank you so much. Dr. Martinez, how do you take care of yourself and or allow others to take care for you in your respective roles? I know as Nicaraguenses, we can be a little bit standoffish, right? With, no me ayudes, I'm fine. So I know that I'm definitely interested because I need tips on how to do that.
It has taken a long time, but I think I've sort of mastered it, I think. But I want to say I'm thankful for my friends, and I think similar to what Dr. Oparah said, is the company that I keep. I am surrounded by strong women who inspire me every day, and I think that's so necessary for me to do. But before that, it would have to be, you know, many people meditate, I pray. So prayer helps me. Journaling, right? To put those thoughts down, to be self-reflective. I've used therapy, you know, normalize therapy. So that's been helpful because you have your professional life, but you also have your personal life that sometimes can affect that, right? So therapy has helped me. But again, it really goes back to that company and having that village who supports me. I can tell you my friends and family have joined today. So thank you to all of them who have joined and have been sending me texts because they have poured a lot into me, especially my friends and family. I spend time with them, you know, whether it's coffee, wine, or just family time, to be able to do that. So whenever I'm feeling down or if I've had a rough week at work, I make it very intentional to connect with friends and say, hey, do you want to go hiking? Because I'm an outdoors person and that really centers me and it helps me. My niece who is here, she's gone hiking with me, friends again. So whenever I can do that, that's truly what keeps me together and just keeps me, again, joyful. I think all of you guys have said that, the joy that it brings to me and keeps me grounded. So that's really helpful for me.
I'm at the beginning of this journey, so I'm going to take Shawn's class and learn more. I'll be honest. I used to have 3 jobs and then 2 jobs and now 2 jobs, right? So I think sometimes when you start in a space where you are the only resource, or you feel like you're the only resource you have, it can be hard to slow down that performance, that hustle. I think I was part of the Childish Gambino, we can sleep when we die, right? Like, let's create, let's produce, the movement needs us now. And I think that starting as a grassroots organizer and then coming into higher ed, the energy of like, this is urgent, has stayed strong. And I haven't quite learned the practice, but I have to say the pandemic has been, even though I was an essential worker, like I was 11, there was 11 of us going there and I was handing out food and technology, the expansiveness of the campus, the quiet, like really showed me that there's something beautiful that I haven't yet discovered. And I have on my new hashtag, Savvy in the Nature. So to be transparent, I just left the Grand Canyon early. I went on a solo vacation for the first time to go be near the nature. I saw an elk. I didn't know it was an elk. I was like, what is that big thing? I had to show the picture to the ranger. So it's okay. I'm at the beginning of the journey, but at least I thank my friends for inviting me into that practice and reminding me that the cause is worth it, that justice is worth it, but also that I'm worth it. And that's something that I'm trying to deeply manifest.
I engage in a lot of the similar practices that have already been shared, right? Getting outside, being in community, investing in friendships and relationships. But I'll just share with you that through this pandemic, being in the position I'm in, I felt like I was caring for so many people. I was caring for every person on my team. I was caring for the institution's goals. And quite frankly, my work doesn't end when I leave the office. I have children and my partner at home. And once I got home, I was caring for them. And it wasn't until probably a couple of months ago that I did a body check, and my body was weary. I've reinvested in myself. I think this semester, I'm really making sure to go back to my practice of setting boundaries, turning things off. I make sure that I communicate clearly to people in terms of how I'm going to respond to their needs, whether it's timelines or just, I don't know, really timelines is probably the most important part, so that I can be fully present for them and be my best self for them. I need to disconnect as well and take time. And I do that by hiking. I listen to books that will sort of give me a different perspective on the world, on issues that I'm thinking about. I self-reflect. I travel, I shop, and all of these things, again, speak to the joy. And quite frankly, with my joy, I try to bring it back into the office. The work that we do is hard and it's emotional. And I think if there's something that I like to make sure that I always leave with my teams is a laugh, a compliment, something positive that will carry them through. And it always makes me feel better too, as I engage with them in partnerships. So self-care is important. You don't have to do it all on your own. There are people who really care and are interested in reinvesting in you, and make sure that you are surrounding yourself with those people.
Thank you, everyone who showed up today and stayed ready with these questions. I honestly, I'm so honored to be here, as a future doctora, and I see these doctoras here in front of me. I am legit fangirling, stalking them. I'm not gonna lie. I'm gonna reach out to them. But I encourage everyone as well who is joining us on Zoom to reach out to them as well. Say hello, ask questions, please. Don't be afraid. Very personable group of women here that have paved the way for us, for us to ask these questions and, be practitioners in the fields that we're going to show up for our community as well. So